Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 25 episodes of Star Trek. After 2 years, we're finally here to my number one favorite episode of the entire franchise. And that is, of course, Duet, the D Space Nine episode. I think anyone who has any familiarity with my channel knew this. Thought that they could predict it quite easily. So anyway, I am joined here, of course, by always great special guests. First, my sister Alyssa. Alyssa, thanks for joining. Your hair looks particularly red today.
Yeah, I just re-dyed it red. It's actually a magenta color, but it looks really red on the screen. Anyways, it's so nice to be here finally at number one. I remember when we did number 25 and you were like, I'm going to do it once a month. And I'm like, it's going to be forever before we ever get to number one. And here we are. And it feels like it was like 2 months ago that we started this. Time is going by fast. But I'm really happy to be here talking about your number one all-time Star Trek episode.
And of course, also joining is Darrin. Darrin, were you surprised that this was my number one, or was it somewhat recently that you were able to figure it out? Oh, sorry, you muted yourself.
Thank you. No, because I really discovered this episode because you have talked so much about it. It's one of those first season episodes that normally, season one, it's like it's got some hit and misses, usually trying to figure things out, but you're usually not waiting until like seasons 2, usually like even 3 or 4 or more before the show really gets into its lane. And I think this is one that I just like skipped. I don't want to hear any more about the War of Cadassia and worrying about that. But ever since you have talked about it and I got a chance to go and see this, no, this does not surprise me at all. This has some of the best stuff of what makes Star Trek Star Trek. It deals with really heavy issues, and even on rewatches and repeats, it still hits hard. So, no, I am really excited to get in and talk about this, because this was really kind of just for a season 1 episode, and this is the best of the series, if not for you, Mark, of all time. Yeah, this was just an amazing accomplishment.
So before we get started, I need to give a special shout out to, although I don't see him in the chat, Tyler Cease. Shout out to Tyler Cease, because I think I was looking for the exact comment, but I couldn't find it. But I'm pretty sure it was back when I was doing like my number 16 or 17 or something like that. He made a comment saying, "Oh, your top 3 is In the Pale Moonlight, The Inner Light, and Duet." And I was like, "Oh, I'm not telling you," but he predicted my top 3 exactly like over a year ago, and then ever since then, it's been repeating it over and over again. I was like, "I'm not gonna tell you; you're gonna have to see." But no, finally, been waiting a year to finally give that credit where credit is due. Absolutely hit it on the head. I mean, it wasn't too hard to guess, because if you look at my number 1 of DS9, it's Duet. My number 1 of TNG is The Inner Light, but you don't know what order I'm going to put them in and stuff. So yes, I have to give him a special shout out to that. Let's see. And Norman in the chat saying definitely a bottle episode. Yeah, I think this is the best bottle episode ever made. But yeah, so we'll start with the overall thoughts. At one point in time, I referred to this as my favorite piece of visual fiction ever, like any movie or play or anything. I don't know if I still would say it's the very best or my very favorite, but it's definitely one of my favorites. I used to go around quoting this episode like I had the whole thing memorized pretty much. I would watch it like repeatedly. I think I was 14 when this first came out, and I saw it when it first aired, and it really impacted me. And don't remember any sort of piece of media sort of impacting me as much as it did. I thought it was really powerful. And I talked about this a lot before, but I really love and appreciate movies and shows where it's two people in the room talking, and it doesn't rely on like fancy cinematography or special effects or action or anything like that. It's just two people in the room talking, and they make it completely suspenseful and compelling, because to me that is way more difficult to do, and that's way more impressive than fancy cinematography or great action, because it relies on the dialogue has to be like sharp. It has to be written very well, and the acting has to be really, really good and really up to the task. And I think this episode nailed it. That's why I'm a big fan of Tarantino and stuff. He's very dialogue heavy. I like the dialogue heavy stuff. But yeah, this fucking nailed it. And it's a bottle episode, as people say. It's easily the best bottle episode. That's why when people try to make an excuse for the TNG clip show episode they did, Shades of Grey, they try to be, oh, they didn't have any money, so they had to. No, you don't have money. They didn't have money here, and they fucking did this amazing episode. So don't give me that no money bullshit excuse. It was just lazy writing, is what that was. But anyway, I will get more into the details, but I'll shoot it over to Alyssa. Alyssa, your thoughts on Duet overall?
Yeah, much like Darren, this episode was not on my radar until you talked about it all the time. But in my case, this was like years and years and years ago, like a long, long time ago. But yeah, I watched the first couple seasons of Deep Space Nine, but didn't think much of this at all. It just didn't even. I just thought of season one of Deep Space Nine is just not a very good season, just like TNG, and then it just wasn't even on my radar till you started talking it up, and then I started watching it again and watching it again, and over the years have come to really appreciate this episode as a really great episode of Star Trek, just for all the reasons that you just stated. I also love a good dialogue episode where you can where it could basically be like a play, or you don't need a whole lot of a stage play, and you don't need a whole lot of props even. It's just really dialogue heavy. And I also can really appreciate that. And I think this was when I did go back and watch Deep Space Nine in order a few years ago. To me, this was the first really great Kira episode, and really great performance by Nana Visitor. Like prior to this, there was that one where she went to that, what was it, that moon or whatever, was trying to evacuate people, and that one was lame, and like I don't know, just she wasn't doing it for me. And they definitely the character went through some I think that they were kind of trying to figure out what to do with this character, and I think Nana Visitor was trying to kind of find her way with this character in the beginning. They made her as like just super antagonistical, and they kind of changed that, and they're still trying to find their footing with this character. And this is the episode, and not only first best Kira episode, but first like truly great character episode, I think, in Deep Space Nine. So historically speaking, it is a really important episode for the series of Deep Space Nine, and covers a really important topic that and themes that would continue to be expanded on throughout Deep Space Nine. So, yeah, really important episode, really great episode. We'll get to where I have it. I don't have it in my top. This is not my number one. It's not in my top 10. But it's still in there. It's still in my top 100. We'll talk about that at the end. Yeah, I, but yeah, I don't think I've ever had it like as my greatest episode of all time as you have, but it is because of you that I've like really grown to appreciate this episode over the years, and the acting and the writing and just everything that's great about it.
Yeah. Look, this episode is great because of Harris Yulin. He is just so awesome as our Cardassian in the center of it. Is he the evil goal? Is he the simple file clerk? I always think of him as the judge in Ghostbusters 2. I think that's where he first kind of impacted me.
I totally forgot about that.
It's the Scolari brothers. So it's always one of those characters, those actors that I always appreciate seeing. And yeah, this episode is just, you're right. It is a bottle episode. It's a perfect episodic. It requires nothing ahead of it and nothing behind it. It simply tells its story. And it's so perfect how it takes Kira from one position to the complete opposite. To, in fact, the guy who, the drunk who we see kind of in the opening, who ends up, killing him at the end. She was kind of him at the beginning of the episode. And at the end, she is cursing who that person is. She's taken a 180 degree. And it's not because we just have a simple tale. We have a very complex tale that requires distrust and investigation and revenge. And they managed to craft a antagonist in this who plays and expects all of those completely. And even on top of that, they give moments of reflection, like at the end of each little beat and scene, where they kind of deal with the reality. Did they accept the bluff that I have? Oh, they've really taken in the truth that I have given them. Oh, what is going to come now? I mean, you really get these great moments of real character bit. And it's one of those where the melodrama that often infects Star Trek, or has been accused of for Star Trek, actually works in this storytelling, because it is, for the most part, entirely performance. It is a deception. Even the truth is a deception to a certain extent. And I think by weaving that kind of complex emotional arc throughout the episode, it makes sense why you would have Kira, who is so full of hate and a thirst for vengeance at the beginning, to look at the end and realize how much war affects everybody, whether you're a victim or perpetrator, and how its hands just corrupt us all. It's just, it really is an astounding way of dealing and presenting all of these issues in one very chunky and very emotionally impactful package.
Definitely. So, getting a bit into the sort of behind the scenes stuff, can either of you care to guess what my top three have in common? The Inner Light, and the Pale Moonlight in this episode.
They are all Star Trek episodes.
There you go. You got it.
No, I don't.
Do they all have the same director?
Close. They all have the same writer.
Ah.
Oh.
So Peter Allen Fields has a writing credit on all three episodes. On the Inner Light, he just has a teleplay credit, and I talked about how he just helped spruce up the script. And in the Pale Moonlight, he has a story by credit because he came up with the original story for In the Pale Moonlight. But this episode, he wrote it. I think it's a teleplay credit, but still he's the one who's credited for like writing the sharp dialogue. And so I've kind of come to the conclusion that he's one of my favorite Star Trek writers, and for some reason they fired him at the end of season 2 of DS9, but he would come back to do freelance from time to time. But I think it's because they wanted to make room for Ronald D. Moore and Renee Echevarria, who are coming over from TNG, but still, it's like, why this guy? He's obviously amazing, especially putting together this episode. So I read a lot about the behind the scenes and the writing of this episode. Apparently they were tired. It was towards the end of the season. They were all exhausted, and someone pitched the idea to do an episode where Kira has to defend a Cardassian in court. And then it was Michael Piller who said he didn't want to do another court drama because they did one earlier this season with Dax, and then so Ira Stephen Bear came up with the idea of doing a man in the glass booth type story, which is a reference to a play that's apparently very similar to this. I've never seen it, or there was a movie based off of it too, but where it was someone being accused of being a Cardassian war criminal, but actually really wasn't, and was trying to, basically the twist ending. And so they came up with that idea, and Peter Allen Fields wrote the script, and and they also had no money because it's the end of the season. They were saving their money for the finale. So it's they wanted a cheap episode, and I think that makes it even more impressive, considering how tired they all were. But any thoughts on the writing, Peter Allen Fields?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I am really glad that they rejected the courtroom thing, because the courtroom thing not only was done earlier in the same season, but was done to death in Star Trek before and after this. It's one of the tropes that I think does get overdone. Some of them are good. There's some good courtroom episodes, but the majority of them are kind of shite. So I kind of love that they're like, no, well, let's do something better, and let's do something that is within our budget. And so really, I love that little tidbit that they we're about to do something really stupid and crappy and decided to do this instead. This is a much better idea. And Peter Allen Fields is not a name that I've heard a lot. I mean, it sounds vaguely familiar, but he's not. When you hear about Star Trek writers, a lot is not one that comes up a lot. So that's really interesting to me as well.
Yeah, so he was mostly freelance. He was only on staff for DS9 season 1 and 2. And the rest of the time, he would just freelance communication. Apparently, he wrote a lot. He started by writing Luoxana Troy episodes. He wrote Half a Life, which is a good episode, and Cost of Living, which I don't think is quite as bad as everyone else says it is. But yeah.
I just love how many creative stories started with, okay, they were exhausted, and it's like, we don't have time to come up with anything complicated. Let's just try and make something simple, interesting. And yes, I have to agree. Moving away from a courthouse drama to doing more of a just investigatory drama. It's like, just keep the focus there. It's nice. It definitely keeps the cast tight and easy. You can pretty much just use regulars with one or two extras or day players. And yeah, you're right. This is one of those that's just, it's interesting because it is simple and straightforward. And so because the premise and the setup is easy, you have time to really play with ideas and don't let them get lost to some sort of like, unfinished plot line because you're trying to cram so many things in. I think this is when storytelling really works its best. So that's all cool to hear. And I'm glad that he came back and also managed to do in the Moonlight, which is obviously several seasons down the road from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I heard like part of the reason apparently that he left is that he was his health was failing a little bit, and that's part of the reason. But
he lost a bet to Berman, and Berman is just he never lets it go.
All right, so but speaking of directing, I wanted to mention the director James L. Conway. He directed several episodes of TNG, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise, but the ones I wanted to focus on was, I think I mentioned him before because the other two I wanted to mention were also in my top 25, Frame of Mind and Damage over on Enterprise. Those episodes are all very acting heavy. So he strikes me as a director who's very good at bringing out the best performance in the actors. And it's interesting because I was listening to an interview with Nana Visitor, and she was saying that for the most part, he basically let the actors do their thing, especially the regulars on the cast, because he figures they know the characters better than he does. But whatever his method is, I think he's like really good at getting great performance and capturing them. Because the thing is with these simple stories where it's just two people in the room talking, a lot of directors or cinematographers want to do wacky, crazy shit. Like fucking Discovery has to spin the camera around constantly. And I love how they don't. Like he does do some great camera moves, but it's very subtle, especially like that push in on Goldar here or Maritza when he's yelling, "What will you do, Major? Withhold my medicine!" And do a slow push in on him, like and little tiny like touches like that, but for the most part nothing like too distracting or too fancy. So yeah, and apparently James L. Conway directed Way of the Warrior as a sort of audition to try to direct First Contact, but they ended up giving that to Jonathan Frakes instead. But which also a great director, so I can't really say anything bad about. But yeah, so any thoughts on the directing of this episode, Darren?
No, that actually sounds great to me. I always thought that directing, especially with television and such, when you have casts that really know their characters and you have something like this, your job is to capture the performance of the actor, and magnify that in order to tell the story the most. Pre-planning super fancy camera stuff doesn't work unless you really know how you're crafting, to me, the whole kind of idea. Severance, we've talked about over on Rob's channel, had a recent episode that its direction was very creative and there was a lot of stuff, but the whole thing was crafted from a very artistic standpoint. For something like this, yeah, when you've got two actors that can really go at it with each other, you want it, to me, and in the very few things that I have directed in my life, it's always best to let the actor go where they're going and then follow that up. Be sure that you are nimble enough and creative enough to capture those moments when you see the actor doing it and being able to magnify, focus on that, or amplify. So yeah, to me, that kind of workman director that just knows how to work with the actors, lets them do it, that sounds like the best way to go, for me at least.
Yeah, I agree. And I also appreciate the subtleties and just not doing the spinning camera. And like it's not Discovery isn't a good example, but just there's a lot of different shows and movies where I saw where they have like a really intense dialogue scene between two actors and they gotta do the spinning camera, they gotta make it all fancy, and it's just like I don't want to like feel like I'm gonna vomit when I'm trying. Like, I just want to be able to soak in what the actors are doing, or sometimes like having weird camera angles that from the floor or something, and sometimes it's just best to just go and have your like you said, Mark, your camera changes like be subtle but good. uh so yeah, I really appreciate this approach as well. And remind me again, I'm sorry, what did you say the name of the director was?
James L. Conway.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, all right. I don't want to quickly address Tyler Cease as a question for Darren, but I believe you answered this last time. Your favorite and least favorite Star Trek episodes? Just wanted to confirm. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, for some reason my window disappeared and I was like, I don't know where we are. Yes, I believe we did talk about that last week. I was mentioning, I think yesterday's Enterprise is one of my absolute favorite. But I've got to say, the fun thing about doing all of these discussions, I've gotten to really re-examine new episodes, and things have started to change. Because I've got to say, I mean, well, I'll have to wait till the end of the episode to say where this would be on my list and so on. But yeah, let's wait till that, and we'll hit that more at the end of the discussion here.
Cool. Yeah, you'll have to forgive me. My internet keeps blocking out, and so I'm not hearing everything that you're saying, but I'll try to. Sucks, but having a lot of technical issues tonight. Yeah, Jake came in 99 saying, "Oh my god, I want to see Duet re-edited to Discovery Bridge camera movie." I don't. No, thank you. It's totally unnecessary. I think what I've always said, and I don't know how you feel about this, Darren, but I've always said that the best cinematography is the one that you don't notice, because if the cinematography is very noticeable, like, and it's distracting, then it's too much. Then, because for me, the whole point of cinematography is to enhance the story, so it should be subconscious. It should be just a great way to enhance and tell the story better.
I don't know if I would say necessarily it should be invisible, because sometimes you're making choices that are specifically intended to impact the audience in a way. So sometimes you want those big vistas, you want those things, you want it to tell the story. You don't want it to be something fancy on top of it as a way to magnify or how you're telling the story. So yeah, if your cinematography is distracting, that's definitely bad. But there are definitely moments where I go like, oh my God, that is an incredible shot. Or, oh my God, what they just did, how they transitioned that scene that was like seamless, and yet it gave me an emotional thing. You know, there are stuff that will impact me as it should, but it shouldn't distract me from what's going on there. And I that's how I would kind of fine tune that particular statement.
Well, no, I mean, that's pretty much what I mean. Yeah, that you can notice it, but it's like in a way that like enhances the story. Like if you're really like sucked into the story, you may subconsciously know, oh, that was a cool camera movement or whatever, but you're still just, it just helps tell the story rather than, oh, look at how cool this is. Because people can do cool camera movements in one shot and stuff, and it enhances the story, but it has to enhance the story, not be distracting.
Yeah, I would use that Severance episode Darren mentioned earlier as an example. The cinematography is very noticeable. It's very unique, but it enhances the story. I think the choices that they make there are perfect for enhancing the story and aren't distracting from the story, but you definitely notice it. I mean, you definitely notice what they're doing there. It's not subtle, but it does work. Just as one example, since Darren mentioned that earlier, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was noticing this other great shot in Duet where Maritza was lying down in the cell, and I never really noticed it before because it's a subtle thing. It's the camera sort of moves and goes over top, and Kira's talking. You can't even see her; you just see her feet in the background. But it's mainly him doing his soliloquy. And Harris Yulin is such a great actor that it's just enhances his performance by doing that. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think really worked for this episode. But speaking of acting, Harris Yulin, who gives an amazing performance in this episode, I think the best I've seen. Most of the parts I've seen him, he's been playing like sort of bit roles. Usually plays like the bad guy and the henchman or a movie or something like that. And yeah, so apparently he was very uncomfortable in the Cardassian makeup and was really claustrophobic and having a hard time. And they had to limit the time that they shot with him, so they had to do all this stuff together. And James L. Conway worked mostly with him, having to deal and like sort of dealing with his, which is funny because you can't tell that at all in the end product. And Nana Visitor, she in an interview, she was talking about how, and not this episode specifically, but the series overall, how she internalized the character of Kira a lot, and that she basically was doing method acting. And but she was saying it got to the point where she was having like nightmares of being in the Cardassian occupation. And she said that therapists that she talked to after the fact saying that that was actually very traumatic and sort of damaging to her mental health by doing it that way, that she's so enveloped the character. But for me, like, this is the episode where that comes out to me, that like makes total sense. and her performance here, it doesn't feel like acting. It feels like a natural reaction, and I think that's because she totally internalized the character in this episode, and I could see that as being a little bit dramatic. Unless any thoughts on the acting?
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, the acting I've always thought was absolutely fantastic for both of those actors. Um, but that's interesting that she was doing a little bit of method acting to the point where it was causing her trauma. Nana Visitor, the poor Nana Visitor. But it does come through in this episode and in other episodes that would come after this. But in this one in particular, yeah, it just feels like a natural reaction to the circumstances and not just flowing naturally from her and not necessarily um, acting. Uh, yeah, and the way that the two of them are able to play off of each other, that I think that I mean, you would. I don't know how often they. I'm assuming they never worked with each other before. I don't know if they ever had, but
No, yeah, they hadn't worked with each
yeah,
other
I
before.
mean, it
Yeah.
just, and you got to give credit to the director on that too. But it just feels like they have really good acting chemistry on screen together, and just flows naturally. Uh, so yeah,
Well, and it also sounds like this would be the perfect combination of director with actors as well. From you're talking about the style of it, is you have Nana Visitor who is internalizing everything and thus being able to bring up these great little moments and reflections that you can really see like weighing in through her mind. And with Yulin, I mean, honestly, the fact that he was so uncomfortable, he probably made to work extremely well in this because he effectively is. He is putting on a face. He is putting on a performance as the character, not just the actor. So that level of push of performance of almost trying to at certain points, let's just get on with this. Let's go. It's time to move this along. That actually really works for what the character is going through for all those moments. So, obviously it's unfortunate when you've got to deal with very uncomfortable situations, whether they be through, trauma from really weighing in your character or dealing with, claustrophobic makeup. But this seems like those difficulties actually played more positively for the performance on this episode. And I think probably because also they were trying to push and get as much stuff going as well, and covered as much per shot or per moment or per setup. I think it really adds an energy to the episode overall.
Yeah, I don't know if I've heard anyone specifically criticize Harris Shulin's performance, but I had heard the observation that he is being very theatrical, kind of over the top, and I did what had to be done. And when I think about it, it doesn't come off as natural, but it just fits. It works for the story like so well, and so it's not distracting in a way like William Shatner's overacting is distracting or bad.
No, I think it works at points where you're kind of like, hey, you're giving away something. You're trying too hard, and you're right. For the character, it works perfectly. So no, this is where I think that balance of melodrama and quiet intensity works so well. Whatever combination he pulled in with this, I think it's entirely perfect within character.
So, all right, the last sort of behind the scenes thing I wanted to talk about was the music, which I think was absolutely amazing. I was listening to the soundtrack, or particularly that ending scene, with just the music, like just the soundtrack to it, without outside the episode, and it's a beautiful piece of music. And there was an interview with Dennis McCarthy, who composed the music. He always does the best music for Star Trek, in my opinion. He's my favorite composer. And there was an interview with him that was taken, I believe, a year after this episode was made, and he was asked like what his favorite episode was. And for TNG, he said yesterday's Enterprise, and for DS9, it was Duet. He said it was, talked about how it was an amazing piece, and he got mostly a lot of like sort of string instruments, like had like 50 of them, like more than normal. He said like most TV shows wouldn't let you do something like that, and I think is amazingly powerful. And I would urge anyone who hasn't heard that piece of music to check it out on YouTube. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. So Alyssa, any thoughts on the music?
No, not particularly. I honestly, so here's where I fess up that I have not been able to rewatch this episode before coming on here. So I think that I'm not as in tune with the music as often as you are. So I honestly don't remember it. So sorry.
No worries. I would recommend checking it out. But Darren.
See, I would say that to me, music is like, well, you were talking about cinematography. If it doesn't distract me from it, should just blend right in with everything. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I did not think of anything in particular that I was like, oh wow, that particular piece of music is. But I think because I was wrapped into so much of what the overall story was, it certainly did not distract. And I think, like anything, honestly, it heightens those emotional moments. So, I mean, I'm kind of being honest and to say that, wow, I wasn't even thinking about the music, but I know that there was so much visual cues in that. But it worked so well within the story. So I should go and listen to that by itself so I can get a pure answer on it. But to me, it worked. It carried all of those emotional moments, and there wasn't anything that felt at any point out of place or unnecessary. So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the episode. So I love the whole structure. I think is perfect. It's beautiful. The way, and I've heard other people complain about it, and they're wrong. But anyway, the whole structure of how they introduce Maritza and Kira. Yeah, the whole thing, the fake out where Kira thinks she's going to see a Bajoran and is like, oh, they're from this labor camp, so it's a sign of hero, and sees a Cardassian and flips out. It was a little bit sort of contrived, I guess, but for the most part, it really works in sort of bringing you into. It's a good hanger for that teaser to sort of bring you into what the story is going to be about. And I actually like how they make it unclear of whether or not he is a criminal or not, or if Kira is just overreacting. And I think particularly what I like about this first part of the episode is the Sisko and Kira relationship, and because they kind of touched on because they were at first had a very rocky relationship, and they were very sort of always fighting with each other, but then there was a couple episodes ago that I think Alyssa mentioned it, the progress one with the grumpy old man, where, and I didn't like that episode either, but there was a scene in it where Sisko said, asked her to come back and said, you're my friend. And so she referenced that here, saying like, you once called me your friend. And if I'm your friend, I'm asking you as a friend to please let me investigate this Cardassian. And I think that was a beautiful scene. And I think that really enhanced their sort of relationship, and that Sisko did let her do it. And then in an earlier scene where she was like flipping out and she was, outlining all of the atrocities that the Cardassians committed. And you see, and again, this is where I think her method acting comes in, because her voice is old people buried alive because they couldn't walk anymore. Like sort of her voice goes up, and it felt so sincere and so natural. And at first Sisko was like, no, you just stay here, I'll handle this. But eventually he trusted her, and their friendship kind of shown through. So I did appreciate that in that regard. So Darren, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the feint, or is it a Bajoran? To me, the character that I saw on screen was immediately suspicious once the Kalanor, disease was brought up. That, yeah, it could be a Bajoran, but that's not the reaction. She didn't have one of those, oh, I must go and greet. Her whole physical response was that. To me, that was the excuse that she was given because she was suspicious. Like, oh, if it is one of these people, great, but I want to be sure. So to me, it worked very well from the suspicion standpoint. And I think that that was important to establish, at least from my opinion, on the whole point of her arc. Because the minute that she saw that he was a Cardassian, it was obviously like, well, you are, Red Call Odo, let's get security down here. To me, she had the suspicion that this might be Cardassian.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you. My interpretation of that scene was she was really excited. She's like, Cisco, please let me, because these Bajoran heroes are like heroes to our survivors. And it seemed like she came down like all happy, go look, oh, I can't wait to meet this Bajoran. And then when she's a Cardassian, it's like flips out like, what the fuck is this? Well, that's at least how I saw it.
Sure, but I mean, to me, I think that an interesting thing that she is presenting, and maybe even that the episode itself is intentionally presenting, is how are you interpret this responding. For me, it was definitely one of those like, this has gathered my attention, I have to go check this out. And considering that she, was the one that came across the camp, that would sort of make sense. But to me, it establishes a great energy from the very beginning. And then, yeah, when she has that scene with Cisco, I think that works very well is you have a representative from an oppressed society that was like, you can't put me aside saying that I can't do my job properly. In the eyes of my people, it should be one of us that is doing the investigation and not, again, shoved aside by the Federation. We'll do it. You're a little too emotional. You couldn't do the job right. You're just, another type of belittlement. I think for her, it's that important way, and a great way of dealing with Cisco is not only is that kind of trust is you're someone that has to step up and earn your position. I need to be someone that steps up and holds my position so you can see that we are being judged by who we are and not as some victims that constantly need help dealing with things. So no, I thought that was a great way of bringing those characters together and kind of, again, establishing the energy that really works so well, the tension throughout the rest of the episode.
Well, I actually thought the misdirect was really important because it it shows you the difference in Kira's reaction when she thinks it's Bajoran as opposed to when she sees it's a Cardassian. So it really establishes this prejudice that she has against Cardassians, which is obviously really important for the rest of the episode as she kind of starts to question this. This prejudice that she has a little bit and starts seeing a little bit more nuance. So to show you at the beginning of the episode where she is right now was a great way of making it so that when we see where she ends up, just how much of the impact of her her encounter with this guy really impacted her and changed her. So I actually, yeah, I do like that they started it that way to just really establish her prejudice against Cardassians. So I thought it worked really well.
Cool. So, yeah. So then we get her first meeting with Maritza, which I thought was very interesting. He's kind of toying with her a bit because, yeah, we know after the fact that this is Maritza pretending to be Maritza, pretending to be Darhiel, pretending to be Maritza. And it's really interesting because he was like, he was saying, oh, I don't have Kalanor, I have Patrick syndrome. And she's like, no, the tests show you have, that you have Kalanor. So if your lie is going to be this transparent, it's going to be a very short interrogation. And it's very playful the way he says, oh, in that case, I'll try to make my lies more opaque. Like that sort of playfulness. But one little subtle moment that I loved about the scene is when she asked, so you worked for Gold Darhiel, you worked under Darhiel or something like that. And he said, his response was, we all did. And the way that he said it, that was a bit of his true self slipping in. That was a sort of, you can tell the sort of the dark, the, guilty, feeling guilty about working for Darhill. But then of course, he covers that again with this persona of so it's just why I love this episode so much. Beautiful nuance scene. So yeah, Alyssa, any thoughts on this first interrogation scene?
No, but that's really interesting because I did not catch that little subtlety that you just pointed out. That's why I like talking about this episode with you, because you notice all these little subtleties that really enhance the episode. But you're right. When I think about it, yeah, that really was like his true self coming out when you look at it in retrospect, because yes, they all worked for Darhill, regardless of what your job actually was. And that's why his guilt was he had the guilt that he did. So yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for pointing that out. That's all I don't really have anything else to
add. No, this is just the great kind of setup, is because of it. The first interview is the truth. He is just telling the truth, but he has already set up that he has lied. So therefore, even the truth will be suspect. And that opens up the door to where his intentional deception is to go. I think to me, it's the brilliant thing about it, because it tells us exactly who he is, what he was doing. I mean, a few little modifications here and there as he really steps into his character. But I think that's the brilliant thing. The best lie is mostly 90% truth. And in that sense, he really does. He lays down the truth with the idea of suspect, and therefore they'll dismiss the truth and look only for the lies that wants to be revealed later on. And I think this is a great setup for their back and forth, their tete-a-tete.
All right, so the next thing I want to cover is I love this scene, even though I think it is kind of consequential, but with Kira and Dax. And this is back in season 1, where they're trying to write Dax to be this, wise Yoda type mentor character, and they completely abandoned that in later seasons. But it's still an interesting scene between the two of them, because, Kira is just basically, confining about how, angry she is. And she confesses like something very important to Dax, because she says, I don't want him to just be a file clerk. I want him to be something worse. And Dax is like, well, you want him to be guilty. And she's like, well, in my eye, if he was there, he's guilty. They're all guilty, which is it's a very important baseline to see that this is a position coming from, just by being a Cardassian, especially a Cardassian who was at Gallaudet. That means he is definitely guilty, and I'm going to just find anything I can to stick on him. It's kind of like the cop who has already convinced someone's guilty of murder and goes out of the way to, plant evidence or whatever to prove it. It's kind of like that. She doesn't care what the situation is. She just wants to see him punished for her own. So I thought that was a very powerful scene. But then Dax ends that with the line that you already know that vengeance isn't enough. And you see the look on her face, her response to that she could tell that what Dax just said like really hit her. Norman in chat saying Dax is like Guinan in this scene. Absolutely, 100%. But yeah, so Darrin, we'll start with you on this scene.
I specifically had notes down on this scene too, because it does. It gives the honest indication of where Kira is coming from, and Dax gets to be that mode of reflection. Is basically was like, basically Kira's asking, is all I want vengeance? And an honest observation of self is like, he's guilty. If he was there, he's guilty. But is that really what I'm searching for? I want him to be guilty. I want him to be this thing. And she gets to again throw those thoughts back to him in the sense of vengeance isn't enough, and punishing an innocent person is also wrong. That if this person isn't guilty of that crime, that you would not feel good doing it. It's throwing up. Remember, you have these moral centers, Kira. Don't let those go because of anger. And so this is the nice moment to give Kira that reflection to re-examine why she's going into things. But of course, then that just sucks her into the trap more.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add.
All right. Okay, so let's see where are we at now. Okay, so we get to the big reveal, and I always remember this as being sort of a big, shocking reveal that they're looking at the different people, and they're like, there's Maritza in the picture, but it looks nothing like him. I was like, see the guy? Oh, that's the guy we know. Well, according to this, is Goldar Heel, and the way like Kira is like, she got what she wanted, and it's kind of like the saying is, be careful what you wish for, you might get it, because she goes in there, all confident about, yeah, just bringing them down, like you did cause all these atrocities, but not only does he admit it, he's like acts proud of it. And let's see some of the things. When he's saying, "Oh yeah, I sent people to go out and kill Bajoran scum. They do it. They murdered him, and they felt clean. Now, why did they feel that way? Because they were clean." It's like, again, this sort of theatrical performance, and what she says, be sure to tell that to the tribunal. And he's like, "Oh, I will," and said, "Oh, they'll sentence you to death." And then this is response that's chilling. He says, "Let them kill me, torture me. It doesn't matter. You already lost, Major. The dead will still be dead." And that Kira herself, and again, Nana's performance, her reaction to this is like so golden, and she can't take it, leaves the room. And this is what I referenced earlier, where they like push in, where it's like, "What will you do now, Major? Withhold my medicine." And the camera sort of pushes in, and he has this crack of a smile. And knowing that what we know is that he is working, he's smiling because this is all performative, and he just hit is actually working. And I think, like, and I said this before, if you look at this episode as like a sort of competition or a sort of mind game between Kira and Darheel, or Maritza, I should say, Maritza wins every single time. He knows exactly what to say to manipulate her. He knows exactly how to hit her buttons. It's not until the end where she realizes who he really is that she like sort of gets the upper hand. But that beginning part where she just freaks out, that's so interesting. Anyway, Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, you're right. He just manipulates her all throughout this episode. And you're right. This is exactly what she wanted. This was the monster that she wanted. She would have been disappointed with anything less than that. This is exactly from her conversation with Dax. This is what she wanted him to be. And he knew that and just totally took advantage of that. And it's fun, as we go on, watch how he knows exactly what she wants and how to manipulate her, and it's really fascinating to watch.
Exactly. This is him relishing this, yes, I'm Goldar Heel. This is again where that melodrama comes in perfect, because it is. He has set Kira up perfectly with the doubt, the suspicion, and then given her exactly what she wants. And that's exactly what he wants. And you're right. I love those moments at the end where they push in and he gives those little moments, which gives away where he's actually taking in that moment of the scene, the moment that he has that moment alone. Yes, it's working. Goldar Heel will pay for this. Cardassia will know they'll have to accept. You can see that it's like it's working in his mind. And it's beautiful. This is, to me, where that relished over the top. Again, it's what we expect from our villain. It is mustache twirly because that's what she wants to see from Cardassia, and he serves it up to her perfectly. And
So and I love the next scene that deals with like how disturbed that she was by that. So again, it's like the be careful what you wish for, because she wanted him to be guilty, but his words like stung so hard, and you see her sort of sulking in Odo's office and feeling like really, upset. And Odo comes in and offers her Moroccan sea veil from Quark's private stock. It just makes me think how Star Trek always adds like an alien an alien word over like a drink or food or an animal, so a Turkalian hawk or something like that. But anyway, but I think this is a nice little scene too, because it's got Odo trying to console her, and he's trying to, she's like, oh, he's probably in there laughing at me. And Odo's like, well, he won't be laughing very long. But the fact that I think what hit her hardest was the fact that when he's like, they'll sentence you to death, and he didn't care. I think that's what's hitting her. It's like, you will never be able to undo what I did. And yeah, and so it's just, but then he brings up the fact that he shouldn't know what resistance cell that she was in. And so this is the first sign to Odo that something's off, that something doesn't fit about Maritza's story. And this is when he starts his investigation, and Kira comes back in to confront him about it, but you can tell that I think he had this excuse lined up. He has like, oh yeah, I used to watch all the resistance reports because I loved reading those reports, because it assured me I wasn't the only one trying to rid Bajor of the scum. So he was ready for his excuse in mind. But anyway, Darrin, any thoughts on these scenes?
Yeah. Well, again, we get a lot of these great, end of scene little moments. For actually, I had with Maritza before he had the last one, she stings off like, I'm going to give Cardassia what they want. To me, it's that sober resolution that he has. He's like, it has worked. I'm committed to this end. It's like, this is going on where it is. And yeah, the fact that Odo wonderfully, I mean, the relationship that this is where we get that great back and forth, and with Odo's character and with Kira, is the fact that he's going to investigate and to bring up and observe the things. He's just distant enough to observe the one little mess up that this guy does. How does he have this bit of information? How was he able to tease you in with that? Because that was kind of the perfect hook as she was coming in. It was one of those where he could really build on it. He could obviously target someone like this, and it's just enough to get her to start to think back. And you're right, he's prepared. And the fact that he's just laying back and just, yeah, go on, it's fine, we're just going to do the next thing. And even pushing back with, how many Cardassians have you killed? Come on, let's talk about how many innocents.
We're about to get to that one.
Okay. All right. So I won't get ahead of that one, but yes. So yeah, I'll hold off on that before we get on to the next one. Alyssa?
Yeah, I love Odo. You can always count on Odo to pick up on the little things and then go, and then look deeper into it. And he's also a little bit more distance, because at this point Kira is just totally drinking the Kool-Aid that Maritza is giving her right now. And Odo has the luxury of just being a step back a little bit and is able to look at it more objectively. So yeah, that's interesting. And we'll get into I'll let Mark talk about the next stuff.
Yeah, all right, yeah. So the next scene, where he said, oh, I have some questions I want to ask you. So then next time we cut back to them, they're basically just like yelling at each other. Oh, she's like confessing. She's like, I was 12 years old when I joined the resistance, but I heard of some other fighters who were younger. And he's just like, yes, let's get to the real issue. How many Cardassians did you kill? And he's like, I mean, personally. And she's like, well, I didn't keep track. He's like, oh, I think you did. Like this sort of back and forth banter. And then he's like, how many then he changes it to, how many Cardassian civilians did you kill? And she was like, look, I regret a lot of what I did. And his response, how convenient of you. That's like such, like right there. That is just such a bastard response. It's like the kind you would expect from like an evil person, where he's, she's saying like, hitting a nerve, something that that she does regret a lot of what she did in Resistance, and she definitely had to do it in the situation she was, and she was trying to convey that, but he's just like, oh, how convenient of you, and when she said I had no choice, she's like, so did we had an empire to protect, and if you groundless scum had to be ground under, then so much the better. And this is, again, this whole episode is very poignant. Not just, I was going to say to modern day, because I was just watching some YouTube videos from hearing some people talk that sounds pretty much just like Darhill, who has that complete bigotry and like this sort of superiority that, their lives don't really matter as much as our lives. And so it's very chilling. And I'm sure that's definitely a timeless thing. It's something that was going on in the 90s when this was made, and definitely before. And this is, of course, based off of a Holocaust. They're basing a lot off of this. Armin Shimon talked about how he really loved this episode because he had family members who died in the Holocaust, and he thought that this episode really handled it well. But yeah, it was chilling to get that exact, knowing that this fictional episode is an analogy that people actually think that way. It makes it more chilling and more powerful. But yeah, and then we get the really chilling line, and where Kira says, because he says that's what justified my actions, and then Kira says my username, nothing justifies genocide, and his response is, what you call genocide, I'd call a day's work, which is one of the most chilling lines I've heard in any fiction ever. And yeah, the nothing justifies genocide, I think, is a good line to quote because it applies. I've seen a lot of people just saying this line out of context in the past year or so. I have no idea why, maybe, but it's kind of an important message to have. But anyway, Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, and I think when you're watching this for the first time, it's just, you're kind of with Kira, because you don't know, obviously, at this point where this is going, and it just the chilling are really is a really good descriptor for those lines, and it really hits home, even if you never personally experienced anything like that. Just the idea of genocide and just not just having such detachment from it, and when you see that, it really it is really chilling. And of course, we'll get to later how this all plans out and how interesting it is when you look about it on reflection of what he's really doing here. He's really, really selling it. But yeah, at this point, when you're watching it for the first time, it's just like you're with Kira, like you're, and I think that's what makes the ending more effective, because then you follow Kira to where she goes later in the episode too. But at this point, you're just like, yeah, this guy's an absolute horrible monster, and I cannot believe he's saying these things, which of course, yeah, again at the end becomes all the more interesting once we get there. But yeah, and again, the acting, yes, melodramatic, but just perfect for what we needed here. I think, yeah, and I never really even thought of his acting as melodramatic before, just because it is so effective in delivering the feelings that they're trying to deliver here. So it's just on point.
Well, yeah, and I think even especially when we get in with this scene too, and in a way, I think he tones it down and focuses it more as he kind of like suckered in with the big bombastic mustache twirling, but now it's that real back and forth. How different from me are you? How are we going to do that? Because to be honest, I think Kira might know how many Cardassians she's killed. Maybe not if you included civilians, maybe with bombings. But I don't think he's wrong in saying, no, I think you do know how many. I think there's a part of her that does, or at least maybe has tried to push that part away. And I think that's what sort of works is he gets that comparison to them as how much they are. And then, that perfect line of, this is a good day's work. This, builds up the actual horror of the moment and shuts it off. And I think it's actually great because even though this is his kind of victory, it's the underlying, I think he knows that he's in trouble because, again, he gets that final scene moment where it's almost a look of concern, like she's asking too many questions. I'm running out of material to defend against. Is she going to see through me? This is the first moment, even after that, where you get that kind of idea of like, maybe this isn't going to go the way that I want it to. And I just sort of love it because he does own the scene so much, but you can see that in the end, even that back and forth has affected him. And I think, again, it's a great perfect setup for when we have our final reveal afterwards.
I love the way, again, this is amazing acting, amazing script, because I love the way he delivers the line of what you call genocide, I call day's work, because it's not over the top. It's not over the theatric. It's just flat out. It's like he knows when to be. Maybe this was, again, working with the director. He knows when to be more theatric and when to just say it like plainly, which was like chilling. It was so chilling the way that he said it.
Yeah, no. I think it's perfect. And that's where, like I was saying, it's like he was up here before and he drops it down to really give that killer delivery. And I think what the scene also sets up is that question that my wife and I, in comparing how the world is moving these days, is that very often it comes down to who do you consider people? And obviously, for Girl Our Heel, the Bajorans aren't people. They're just this thing in the way. And he's trying to use that in order to obviously get Kira to say, well, Cardassians aren't people either. And so it excuses doing this type of behavior. And I think that's always a good question to ask when people start dismissing is like, okay, so are those not people anymore? Because if they're not people, you're probably on the wrong side of decision making.
Yep.
That's my little hint.
100%. So I just wanted to address in the chat, Joseph was saying Ira Stephen Bear has stated that the occupation of and the brutalization of Bajorans was inspired by the treatment of Jews in Europe, but also the occupation, brutalization of Palestine. I'm not sure if that was Ira Stephen Bear who said it. I thought it was actually Michael Piller who said that. Maybe Ira Stephen Bear said that as well. But I think Michael Piller talked about when he created the Bajorans, it was based off of a lot of sort of oppressed and brutalized people, including, the Jews of in Europe in World War II, but also Palestinians and also Native Americans and the genocide that they endured. So it's sort of a amalgamation. But I think like this episode in particular is definitely more specifically honing in on that Holocaust analogy. But either way, it's like, it definitely could be seen a commentary on genocide or brutality throughout human history. But anyway, so let's see. We're up to let's see, where am I? Okay, so when the rest of the crew kind of figure out the jig, like mostly Odo, because again he shows him as a brilliant investigator, and again, as you said earlier, like he has that objective eye too. He's not sort of rattled the way Kira is, and he works with Bashir, and they come up with the plan. He calls up Ducat, and he's like, Ducat, I missed playing these games of Timmy and Martar with you, and I was like, yeah, we only played one game, and you cheated. That's like so Ducat, and but anyway, so he gathers all the information and delivers it in Sisko's office. And I think this is also a brilliant scene because I think it totally makes sense that Kira is very much in denial at first. That she's very, more evidence from a trustworthy Ducat. But then when Bashir comes in and says, oh, he's been taking this medicine 5 years ago for after cosmetic surgery, so he actually changed his face. And I think it speaks very highly to Kira's character that she was able to accept it. Because let's face it, there's a lot of people in real life who are so closed-minded that even when they're presented with irrefutable, undeniable evidence, they've already made up their minds on someone or something, that there's nothing that's going to change their minds. And yes, this whole episode's about Kira and how she's very sort of bigoted toward Cardassians and had the axe to grind against them and wanted them to be guilty. But I love that when she's confronted with the truth, that she's able to be open-minded and to see the truth and to see that the things aren't as what they appear. Which, yeah, I think is a brilliant scene. But anyway, Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what makes the episode. I mean, if Kira was just going to be one of those closed-minded, bigoted people or unable to change, then we wouldn't have the great character story that we have. And that's why I said earlier that I think this really was the first truly great Kira episode because of the change that she makes, and because that we learn that she's capable of making that change. Because up to this point, we've only seen from her this prejudice against Cardassians and the occupation and everything else. And again, they really established that firmly at the beginning of this episode. So this was like a revelation that we learned that, oh, but Kira, when she gets new information, she is a critical thinker. She can say, oh, and she can chew on that. And that what makes her an interesting character again, because if she didn't, she's like, no, I don't believe you, this is a lie, then I wouldn't be interested in that character as much. So and again, Nana Visitor, I believe I've heard you say, Mark, that people have criticized her as an actor, and maybe in some episodes she doesn't pull through, but I mean, you can, whatever criticisms you could have for Nana Visitor, I mean, those have to be thrown out the window in this episode, because everything she does here is just perfect. Yeah, the changes, that the internal changes that this character is going through, and the fact that she's able to have that critical thinking and make that change, just really good.
Yeah, and obviously, if she's not our hero character, if she can't take the new information and actually pull it in, I mean, I guess that would separate us from our villain versus our hero. But this does work so well, I think, because there have also been doubts have sort of set up and her own type kind of things and pushing back and forth. I do like the fact that you're right. She pushes back against the information initially, and when she has too much, then she has to weigh it. And I think what really works, and I think this is probably her internalization, which to me plays very well in with the character, is it's not just that this isn't the guy that I thought it was. It's like, why the hell would he do that? Why would he pose this? What does he want? It does. It's one of those where it short circuits the hate because you're confused. Why would someone do this? And I think that's the great motivation afterwards, because it's not when she comes back to do her face-to-face in the next scene, it's not with hatred, it's not with anything else, it's almost confusion. Like, why the hell would you say that you're Charles Manson? Why would you pop out and say, I am, Jack the Ripper? When you're clearly not, and you're not trying to get attention, you're what? And I think that that's kind of a great move. And the fact that it comes from, obviously people that she trusts, it forces her to have to take in this information and not just throw it away. And I love how she reacts to that.
Darren, you're triggering me a little bit by mentioning Jack the Ripper because that's a different Star Trek episode.
Oh God, yeah.
Sorry, everyone. Don't mean to do that. Negative. Let's see. Look into the light. Blink.
Oh God, what a terrible episode that was.
Anyways, Matt, go on. Sorry.
Yeah.
What did someone ask you what some of my least favorite episodes were? Well, yeah, we'll go on.
That was it? The Jack the Ripper one? Yeah.
It's one of them. Yeah.
Wolf in the Fold. Yeah, it's definitely up there. I mean,
yeah. So anyway, so then we get the scene where Kira confronts him. And again, it starts with you see that instant like in tone and manner, the role reversal. Like Kira now has the advantage, the way she comes in and he's like, he's like says something about, oh, you just don't understand me. It's like, I'm actually coming to understand a lot about you. And she says that with like confidence, and he's like, oh, is that so? And tries to play it off, but then she keeps hitting him with all the evidence that she was just presented. And he was like, the reports are wrong, and he's getting like very upset, and he was like, go away, your presence no longer amuses me, get out. And because he doesn't want it to be discovered, but the more like she triggers him, the more that she realizes like I think she's like realizing it as she's talking to him. It's like, you're Maritza, aren't you? And it's like, you mistake me for that nothing, you stupid Bajoran girl, don't you know who I am? But she was like, lets it out. And I love this. Again, this is such an amazing scene. So this is where Harry Sheelan's performance is definitely at the best. This is the scene in particular where you should listen to the music. The music is absolutely like haunting in the scene that really enhances performance, where he goes from, I'm alive, I will always be alive, it's Maritza who is dead, Maritza who is good for nothing but crying in his bed and weeping like a woman. And then he breaks into tears, and you find out that it actually was Maritza, and that he was feeling guilty, and that he was the one breaking into tears because he heard these screams of mercy from all these atrocities that were being committed, and he was too cowardly to do anything about it. And of course, like, what could he have done? He couldn't have done anything about it. And so that guilt has sort of eaten him alive to the point where he wanted to do something right. And as he said to Kira, it's like, Cardassia must acknowledge his guilt. We're guilty, all of us. So it's not just he wants Cardassia to be begetter, it's that he can't live with his guilt. Like, he purposely wants to die. Like, that's part of the thing. And he wants his death to mean something, to do something. And but Kira, I love her fucking line, the way that she is like, what you want is another death, and enough good people have already died. I won't help kill another. Such an amazing scene. And again, it's the character arc for Kira that she's been on. She went from, I want him to be guilty, to realizing, no, this is actually a good person, and there's good people. There are good Cardassians, and he's a good person, and I won't let them kill him. It's an amazing journey that was so well earned, and again, this performance was just so damn good. Darren, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really add anything more on top of it. Yeah, the performance is perfect. The moment that he breaks, and then when she lets go and steps in to try and comfort him, and he retreats like a caged animal about to be beaten again. I mean, it's just, you really start to see he suddenly goes from being, I'm this mustache twirling villain, to, I too am a victim. Not in so many words, but that is exactly how she starts to see it with him. Jake Heyman had brought up about the motivation for trying to be punished, and that he didn't buy it off of this storyline. To me, this is what actually sells it, is, yeah, he's traumatized. He has nightmares every night. He cannot forget the screaming. All he wants to do is to end it. And the only way he can give this suffering any type of meaning is to try and get it exposed, and not just so much in a way that Cardassia itself has to look at the crimes and things that it has done. The fact that, yeah, Cardassia must face its guilt. It reflects, in our current age of ignoring history and thus being doomed to repeat it. Look, we look at the bad things that we've done so we don't do them again. We don't say we didn't do them because we're not bad people. That's stupid. That's exactly, without this memory, we don't have a reason to avoid doing those things. And so in a way, his motivation for what he is trying to do is ultimately selfless in a traumatized, selfish way of this is the only way that I could do things. So I will change my face. I will let it heal. I will become this person. The years that he had to put in with this, and it all comes out right in this scene. And at this point, Kira has no other point but to face her own hatred, what he has done, why he would do this, why he would put himself in a position, and just to see that here is somebody who has suffered just as badly as anyone else in their own way, and certainly doesn't deserve to die. And now someone that she would have been ready to kill without a thought, she refuses to kill because of how wrong that would be. And yeah, it's a perfect twist right here. No reversal, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of a twist. Yeah, it's such a great scene because again, to me, I guess what I just really latch on to the most, and I've mentioned this a lot already, is Kira's journey that she goes on. Because it's not just in the singular episode, but every episode prior to this, whenever they have brought up her feelings toward the Cardassians and to the occupation, it has been that. And so it's her ability to recognize that, oh, not all Cardassians are actually evil, that she sees in this guy's guilt, his remorse, and this action, this extreme action that he's trying to take to try to cover up. I mean, going so far as to get surgically altered and taking on this persona and pretending to be this monster to try to justify or rectify, his guilt, to try to do some healing, and her being able to recognize someone who feels that much weight, that much guilt. That is not a monster. That is a person. And for Kira to be able to recognize that, that was just such a key moment for the character in the history of the character development. And I will also say that this was a really important moment in Star Trek overall, because we get a lot of Star Trek, and we did get a little bit of this with the Romulans and TNG as well. So this is not like it's the first time, but you go in a TOS, and it's just a lot of like mustache twirly. All Klingons are evil. And in the beginning, all Romulans were evil. And again, we do get a little bit in the TNG into the nuance of the Romulans as well. But at this point, like, all Cardassians were evil. So it's not only important for the character, but it's important for us as the audience to see that this just isn't a monoculture. The monocultures in Star Trek sometimes drive me crazy, that like every member of the species is exactly the same way. So I always appreciate when Star Trek is able to point out nuance in a species and go, oh no, actually they're not all exactly the same. But and of course, just as importantly, or not more importantly, Kira coming to that realization for the first time. So this is just absolutely golden, and it's I'll say it's what makes the episode, but we'll talk about the closing scene. I think it is also makes the episode, and it's kind of a perfect scene. But yeah, this is her coming to that realization, and again, None of Visitors acting is just on point.
Yeah, that is definitely a really good point about the monocultures and Trek. It's something I always rail against, like, all Ferengi are greedy, all Klingons are warriors, and it's great to see, to show some nuance to the species.
What are you saying, Human? All right.
All right. So I want to thank Brandon Niles for super chat. Thank you so much. Very generous. Always a pleasure to see you having fun, Rick. Well, thank you. I don't know if fun is the right word for it, but yeah. So we get to the final scene where Kira's just walking with Maritza and saying, what you tried to do was very honorable, and Cardassian's going to need good people like you. But then that drunken guy comes up and stabs him, kills him. And I like how they did foreshadow this drunken guy earlier in the episode. He was like, let me know when you hang the Cardassian. And that he was just, some ruffian who was controlled by hate. And then, of course, she kills them. And she's like, why? Why'd you do this? He wasn't Darhill. He's like, yeah, he's a Cardassian. That's reason enough. And then Kira says with conviction, no, it's not. And you feel like, again, talking about her journey, that she is coming to that realization. Like, she's coming to realization that it's not enough that they're just a Cardassian. And it gets to the tragedy, like how tragic the whole episode is. Part of why I love this episode, not just the drama and the commentary on genocide and the commentary on bigotry and the great acting, but it's a very interesting mystery. It's one of the more interesting, like, up and downs, sort of with twists, where you think it's just normal Cardassian, then he's called Darhill, then he's not, and then he's killed. Like, the way it ebbs and flows, I think, is amazing storytelling combined with that. But I have heard people complain about this finale. Some people say that they didn't like this final scene, that was too unnecessary, and they could have just ended it with the previous scene, that it seems random that some random drunk guy kills him. But I very much disagree, because it hits to the theme of hatred and bigotry, and how some people can't get over it and some people can. I was talking about that closed-mindedness. Of course, our main character Kira is not going to be that, but this random drunk guy is going to be that, and it's going to affect, and a good man dies because of it, and just speaks to the tragic of the whole situation, of how hatred begets more hatred, and it doesn't solve anything. So I actually thought it was fucking brilliant. But anyway, Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I would also just strongly disagree with that point of view, that this was not necessary. I think this was the perfect ending. I think you absolutely needed that line from Kira. No, it's not. It's not enough. Yes, we already saw that she was headed in that direction, but this is like the final. This is like, she's there. No, him being a Cardassian is not enough to justify his death. And but along with everything else, I also think that this is in general a commentary on war and what it takes to be a part of a war, because Kira, in defending her people, had to see the Cardassians as monsters, because she probably did along the way kill some civilians. Cardassian civilians are people who weren't directly responsible for the atrocities, because that's what she needed to do in order to defend her people. That the plans that they're making as a cell, a terrorist cell, aren't going to be nuanced into like, well, we're gonna like see who's the ones who actually committed the atrocities and who's no, they're not doing that. They're killing whoever, because that's what they feel they need to do in order to free themselves and defend themselves. And so it requires this level of detachment that we see from Kira, where she just thinks, oh, all Cardassians are monsters, and that's what it takes to be a part of this war. And I think if you look at it just more broadly, like, again, Star Trek always brilliant on the war commentary, that this is what it takes to be a part of war. And of course, when we get into season 7 and we get into Dominion War, they do that very brilliantly as well. But that we see that this is what Kira had to do in order to defend herself. And now that the occupation has ended, the Federation is there. Now she's able to kind of go through this process of learning that, oh, actually, No, not all Cardassians are evil, and no, just being a Cardassian in and of itself is not justification for murder. And it just so yeah, this scene. I mean, this is one of those perfect endings. So I just can't even imagine. Everyone has their opinions, but I just can't. It just absolutely cannot imagine not having this scene. I think this is the perfect way to end this episode.
Yeah, it's the ending that makes the story poignant. Because yeah, if they ended it before, then it would have been a nice Star Trek episode where they do the exterior shot of the station, and the credits get to come up, and everybody's happy, and maybe you're seeing a ship going away, and it's like, there he is, he's gonna go get help and be fine. But no, it's not that type of story, and the good happy ending doesn't work to make the point. Joseph says it right here, the drunk guy is where Kira was at in the first episode of the first season, in the very beginning of this season. This is where Kira was at, and we get to see that at the beginning of the episode, and by the end, it's not. Now, others are also people in her mind. She has expanded the area of who that she considers people and acceptable. She is not closed off and hate-filled and driven just by this whole desire. That Alyssa was right, is when you're in war, you're probably going to have to think of the enemy as horrible monsters in order to do the things that you have. And you can't be like, all right, we're going to bomb that center and then be sure that we clear the streets so that the emergency personnel can come and take care of any wounded. Okay, that's not part of those plans. You have to do what you have to do. And this is how you evolve, as you get through a circumstance that forces you to re-examine how you see things, and now suddenly have to understand that other people can also be hurt and can be victims and can be such. So no, I think the episode doesn't work the way that it does without this ending, because I think that's what makes it poignant, and that's what underlines where Kira has gone from these are monsters to no, but they're people also. And that's the big difference. Yeah.
100%. So yeah, I gotta answer J Came in 99 in the chat. Why didn't the drunk guy kill Garrick during lunch? Because Garrick is too badass. He would never get away with that. Garrick would see.
That's why I never sit with my back to the door there, Doctor.
Oh, I had a more simpler answer than that. It's because he's a main character.
Yeah, no, that's true. That too.
Damn plot armor knife.
Well, at this stage,
He's not a main character at this stage, but yeah, he's a recurring character.
Well, that's the thing. He only appeared in one episode, so in this stage, they didn't know he was still on the station. It wasn't until they brought him back later. That's why the drunk guy never killed him.
Well,
yeah, that guy's like, well, I guess I just threw my life away. I'm going to jail for the rest of my life just to kill this guy. Yeah. But I made the statement, right? Yeah, I don't know.
But the real answer of why he did it is because he was drunk. But nah, yeah. So that's Duet. Yeah, absolutely. I think it does all these things. Like, that's why it's my favorite episode of the show. I mean, it maybe doesn't encapsulate Star Trek because it's not about weird sci-fi shit, which is the main thing Star Trek is about. I think it does kind of encapsulate Deep Space Nine. And Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek, but it's just a brilliant episode with amazing performances, touches on a lot of good character development, good suspense, mystery, and also just has some of the most poignant. And what you said, Darrin, just now about that and how you need that ending to leave on that note that really hits home is 100. It's just so true, because every time I watch this episode, I must have seen it at least 100 times by now, but every time I watch it, the ending just hits me, and it's left me like with a deep feeling of pondering all the messages of the episode. So I think it's amazing. So anyway, we'll get to the titular question. Now, you can't have it higher because it's my number one. So I guess the question I'll ask, is it around the same? Would you put it in your top 5 or is it outside of your top 5? Alyssa, I already know the answer for you, but so we'll start with you. Where would you put this?
So last year I did my top 100. This for me was number 40. And don't think, oh, Mark had number 1, Alyssa had all the way back at number 40. She hates this episode. No, it's still in my top 50 out of like 800 episodes. I think it's more that maybe I prioritize certain things, aspects of Star Trek over others, and all the great things that we just talked about in this episode is not what makes the number 1 Star Trek episode for me personally. It is what makes it for you. So that's really the difference. That's splitting hairs. Number 40 is still the top 50 of all of Star Trek, just so we're clear. 800 something episodes. So it seems like it's a huge difference, but honestly, it's not because it's still like once you get into that top 50, like I feel like my top 50 for me personally is all great episodes of Star Trek. So then it's just like figuring out, okay, which one is greater than the other episodes? And it gets into more of like, what do I prioritize as far what makes the best Star Trek episode for me? And all the things that we talked about that make this episode great, make it great. But maybe that's not what makes the best Star Trek episode for me. So I don't want to like, number 40, but no one should misconstrue that as like that I think this episode sucks or anything like that.
Yeah, so it's so yesterday's Enterprise was Darren's number 1, that was your number 2, and I had it at number 16, but I still love it. It's still like top best of the best, as you said. It's like out of 800 episodes, so it's no disparaging, no saying, oh, and you're right, once you get down to the bottom, it is kind of splitting hairs, and it does have a lot to do with individual taste and what they look for. But yeah, so Darren.
Well, yeah, I mean, Chain of Command ranks pretty high on me, but one, just because I love David Warner and would be happy to watch him kind of do most anything. So yeah, I mean, there's points where they become all very sort of personal, and where do they sort of lie into? Now,
for the record, sorry, just real quick for the record, Chain of Command did not make my top 25, but would make my top 50. Just to be clear. But anyway,
sure, yeah. Well, I mean, it does have our lovely Captain Jellicoe. And, God, how can you go wrong with that?
Best captain ever.
shining individual. But yeah, and we did forget to talk about our great Quark scene in this episode, which is just 2 seconds, but I love it, where he's looking at the other Bajor victims of this, and is like, do you think they gamble? It's just, I don't know. I love Quark's little moments. But yeah, this would definitely top 10, most likely top 5. I would say, just because, again, it deals with all of the great questions that I like kind of in any type of show. And I think it does it with its own particular Star Trek kind of twist. When you have these questions of morality, that's why I liked In the Pale Moonlight so well, is because you have that big morality question at the end, is what would you do or what wouldn't you do? And, and that way it's kind of an acceptance of how far you would go. And in this episode, it's kind of a reflection that I'm not going to go that far anymore. I have lines. I have new ways of viewing things. I have a larger vision. So I love all of these when we have those big questions that are asked, that are ways, and they don't shy away from the tough endings. Yes, I don't know if this would be number 1, because I have a different number 1. Is it in my top 5? Most likely, definitely in my top 10, because it deals with all of the big questions that I really enjoy when Star Trek examines.
It's also really interesting about this episode is that it's in a kind of subpar season. Like season 1 of Deep Space Nine is easily the worst of the show, yet has this amazing episode in it. It's even more impressive.
Yes, and just responding to Jay Kamen, if we're going to do 2 years of the top worst episodes, 40% of it would be Picard season 2, and none of us are going to watch that again. So we could just skip all the way down to like the top 10.
Well, Mark, I believe you already have done your worst episodes.
I have, yes. So I already have my top 25 worst on my channel, although it's only the Legacy Trek. So yeah, Picard season 2
So
would
there's no
dominate.
Picard in it.
Yeah. It's just the Legacy Trek doesn't have modern Trek. But yeah, no, I did an individual video for each of my top 10, and then I did a separate one for number 25 through 11. So it's already there. If you want to find
Don't
it.
need to do that again.
Yeah, no, we don't need to do it in live stream.
And you'll do the top 25 Strange New World episodes as soon as they actually have 25 episodes that you can sort through.
I mean, you could do the top 25 modern Trek, but I mean that's ongoing, and it's What are we thinking now, Mark? We're finished. What now? Like we're not going to do these monthly videos anymore.
I know it's going to be weird. We've been having every month having this to do. I guess I'll just have to find other random stuff. I don't want to commit to another 2-year commitment series like this. We'll just have to find other random Star Trek things to talk about. But yeah, so we're finally done. Finally done the top 25. Of my episode. Oh, we can do Darren's top 25 next.
Gee, look at this! I got this thing. I gotta. That would take a while for me to try and sort through and find. I don't have that time lately.
Fair enough. But no, I'll find. Yeah, there'll be other random Star Trek streams from time to time. Anyway, I would like to thank everyone for joining. It was Brandon. Good to see you as always. Jay Kamen, Joseph, Norman, Tyler was here earlier, and I think a few other people might have stopped by. But anyway, thanks everyone for stopping by. Good to see you in the chat, and everyone who happens to be watching wasn't in the chat. Still, thanks for stopping by. Great for checking us out, and everyone watching us in the archives. Yeah, thanks for checking us out, and thanks for sticking with us for the 25 episodes. And yeah, I was doing this as a companion piece because I did my top 10 worst already, and I was like, oh, I should do a best, but I didn't want to just do the same thing because I actually already reviewed most of my best episodes. So I was like, hey, how about live streams? That way I can talk about it with other people. And it turned out great. It was a great thing, and I'm going to miss it. But anyway, it's always great having you here. Great having talk about a great Star Trek episode every month, but now it's over. But anyway, big thanks to Darren and Alyssa, stuck with me through most of my 25, and thanks for sticking out with me and coming here for this. So Alyssa, if you want to give a shout out, I think you're doing something on my birthday. A shout out to what you got going on, and where people can find you.
Yeah, I'm celebrating Mark's birthday by doing a live stream that Mark is not a part of. Because he's going to be doing family things.
I'm going to be out celebrating my birthday.
Okay. Yeah, I figured you'd be doing something. So it just happens. I do every 3 months. I do a live stream where I drink some wine and we just talk about random whatever stuff. And it just so happens that it was March is time for my live stream, and it just so happens that Saturday the 15th is really the best day that I have to do it. So that's when it also happens to be Mark's birthday, but the two things are not related. But you can join me live on Alyssa Jane's Reviews, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Saturday, March 15th. And that is the big thing that I have upcoming. I keep having thoughts of doing like it's just this political diatribe and just like spill out all my thoughts and feelings about what's going on in the world, in the country with with my community particularly, but I just never have the energy to sit down and do it. Maybe one day I'll do a video like that, or maybe some of it will spill into the live chat. Who knows? We don't know. Or we could just be talking about random stuff like we talk about bears and animals and TV shows from the 80s and whatever random. You never know what we'll talk about. So come on over and I hope. I know Brandon will be there. Norman is usually there, and a few others. So come join us, and I'll see you there.
All right, Darrin, what do you have going on? Where can people find you?
Well, just started doing Daredevil Born Again, which is the new returning series. Depends on how you look at it all. I'm on Disney Plus, doing those discussions with Rob from Smirking Gun Reviews, and those are Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central. And then we'll have a couple more episodes of Severance, which I'm also discussing with Rob, but over on his channel, Smirking Gun Reviews, and that's Friday at 6:30. So those are the two big things that I'm doing over on D's Reviews, and then we'll be doing Andor when it comes out in April. That's all I've got scheduled right now. A few ideas, a few plans, but nothing definitive. But yeah, man, I've been gonna miss not talking Star Trek. We're gonna have to do something because this has really been a blast, and I've really enjoyed getting to be here and chatting with you and Alyssa. And enjoying some really good episodes. So this has really been a blast, and thanks so much for including me with it.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for coming. Yeah, I'll do my own video review for Severance season 2 when that finishes too, because yeah, it's such a fucking good season. It's so good. I think it's even better than the first season. But anyway, if you're finding me for the first time, my name is Mark. Channel is Enchantment of Eternity, and covering finished doing my top 25, but I am still covering Star Trek one episode at a time. It's gonna be several years before I'm done that. I'm up to season 3 of Deep Space Nine. Just started season 1 of Voyager, so we'll be doing DS9 and Voyager for the next year or so. So yeah, that's what I'll be up to, and other random Star Trek videos and other random stuff. And hey, I'll be back for some live streams with these two, definitely. But anyway, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for checking out my channel. We will see you later.